No doorbell, no footsteps in the hall, no one asking where the bathroom is or helping themselves to the last beer in the fridge. This, right here, is your happy place. Before we go any further, I should introduce myself. My name's Frank, and I've spent a long time watching people. Not in a weird way, just observing. And what I've noticed about you is interesting. You have friends, real ones, people you actually like, and yet the moment someone says, "Hey, can I come over?" something changes in you. A small tightness right in the chest. Not excitement, more like a warning light. And here's what nobody ever says out loud. You don't feel guilty about it, you just feel tired before the person even shows up. That's what this is about. Not the guilt, the reason. Now, a lot of people will tell you it's simple. You're an introvert, you're just tired, you're getting older. Those answers are not wrong, they're just shallow, like diagnosing a car engine problem by saying, "It sounds weird." The real answer is older than any label you've put on yourself. And it starts not in your living room, but in the house you grew up in. Think about the world you came into. You were born somewhere between 1965 and 1980. That makes you Generation X. And the one thing Gen X had more of than any other generation in American history? Divorce. Divorce rates in the United States peaked right when you were a kid. Researchers who wrote about your generation called it, without flinching, the original cultural sin. The highest rates of marital breakdown this country had ever seen, and you were the children sitting in the middle of it. Maybe that was your house. Maybe it was your best friend's house across the street. Either way, you know what that world felt like. Because even if your parents stayed together, half the kids in your class had parents who didn't. Divorce wasn't a tragedy anymore by the time you were 10. It was just Tuesday. Now here's where it gets interesting. Researchers at Baylor University ran a study, published and verified, looking at what happens to kids when their parents divorce. Not just emotionally, chemically. Oxytocin is sometimes called the bonding chemical. Your brain releases it when you feel close to someone, when you trust them, when you let your guard down around them. The Baylor study found that adults who grew up with divorced parents had, on average, oxytocin levels that were 1/3, not 1%, not 10%, 1/3 of the people whose parents stayed together. 1/3. That means the chemical that helps your brain say, "This person is safe, let them in," is already running lower than it does in other people. Before anyone has even knocked on your door. This is not a character flaw. This is chemistry, shaped by a childhood you didn't choose. And here's where the second thing happens. You came home to an empty house a lot as a kid, and the world will tell you that was lonely. And some days, yeah, it probably was. But something else also happened in that quiet house that nobody talks about. For maybe the first time all day, you were in charge. No one telling you what to do, no fights in the background, no tension at the dinner table, just you. Your rules, your space, your pace. Psychologists call this restoration, the idea that certain spaces help your brain recover from everything the world threw at it that day. And for a lot of kids in your generation, the quiet house was where that happened. Not because the emptiness was ideal, but because the quiet meant safety, and your brain filed that away. Quiet house equals safe. People in the house equals something to manage. Fast forward 30 years. According to a House survey from 2023, Generation X spent more money on their homes that year than any other generation. The median Gen X homeowner spent $25,000 improving their space. $25,000 on a house that, if you're being honest, you'd prefer nobody else came into. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. You built something. You curated it. Every throw pillow, every piece of furniture, every single mug in the cabinet is there because you put it there. And the whole thing hums along at exactly the frequency you need. Now someone wants to come over and sit on the couch, use your bathroom, touch the thermostat. Now here's something people get wrong about you. They think because you don't like having people over, you must be antisocial, shy, unfriendly, broken in some way. Watch you at a reunion sometime. You're not hiding in the corner, you're talking, laughing. You can work a room just fine. You remember people's names. You ask the right questions. You're not bad at people, you're just bad at performing for people inside your own house, and that's a completely different thing. At the restaurant, you're a guest too. The environment belongs to everyone equally. Nobody's keeping score. You can leave when you want. The check comes and that's the signal. Clean, simple, done. At your house, there's no check. There's no signal. People stay until they decide to leave. And until they do, you're on the whole time. And this is where your generation runs into something other generations just don't feel as hard. You were raised to be self-contained. Psychologists who study your generation use that exact phrase, emotional self-containment. It's not coldness, it's armor. You built it because you had to. When the world around you was noisy and unpredictable, fighting parents, absent parents, economic uncertainty, the Cold War playing on the news every night, you learned that the safest bet was to keep your own emotional house in order. Deal with what's in front of you. Don't fall apart. Move on. And you got very, very good at it. You were the generation that figured everything out for themselves in an empty house with no instructions and came out the other side functional, more than functional, competent. The problem with armor, though, is that it works both ways. It keeps the chaos out, but it also makes the quiet feel necessary, like oxygen. Because for your nervous system, quiet isn't just pleasant. It's actually how you recover. There's actual science behind this. Introverts, and a significant portion of Gen X identifies this way, even if they never used that word for it, process social interaction differently than extroverts. For an extrovert, being around people is energy. It fills them up. For a lot of you, being around people, even people you like, costs energy. And your home is where you charge back up. Now, imagine someone comes over, and they're perfectly nice, and you genuinely like them. By the time they leave, you're not exhausted because something went wrong. You're exhausted because your home stopped being a place to recharge and became a second shift. Now, here's a thing your generation does that almost nobody talks about. A meme started going around in Gen X communities online a while back. It said, "Gen X can hold a full conversation in a trauma voice." The comments under that meme were full of Gen Xers joking about delivering work presentations while emotionally falling apart on the inside. Nobody around them could tell. They just kept going. Gallows humor, the Gen X specialty. But underneath the joke is something real. Your generation never had much space to fall apart in public. You learned to hold it together, at school, at work, in the world. The one place you were allowed to just be was home. That's why guests feel like so much more than just company. They're an interruption to the only place you ever got to drop the act. Here's what's interesting. You grew up in a world where you had almost no control over what happened in your house. Parents coming and going, rules changing, the emotional temperature of the room shifting based on things you had nothing to do with. You learned early that other people's moods, other people's decisions had a way of landing right in the middle of your life, without warning, without your permission. And so by the time you had your own place, your own space, there was something in you that said, "Not here, not this one's mine." Controlling who enters your home isn't antisocial behavior. It's the first boundary you ever got to set that actually stuck. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that every Gen X person hates visitors. That's not true, and it's too simple. Some of you have partners who love to entertain. Some of you have kids who fill the house with chaos and you wouldn't trade it. Some of you host dinner parties twice a month and actually enjoy it. What I'm describing is not every Gen X person. It's the part of Gen X that built themselves out of silence, that found peace by building order in their own space after a childhood that had very little of either. And that part is pretty common. Here's what's interesting. When you do let someone in, really let them in, it means something. Because you don't hand that out like flyers. You had to earn the trust of someone who spent their whole life learning that other people could disrupt the one thing they worked hard to protect. That's not cold, that's just honest. And honestly, a little refreshing. You were not antisocial. You were selective. There's a difference that took your whole life to earn. The people on your couch, they made the cut, and they may not even know what that means. The rest of the world gets maybe. Your home gets only if you mean it. And if someone has a problem with that, they can always meet you at the restaurant. And maybe, just maybe, there's a moment every now and then when you sit in that quiet room after everyone's gone, and you feel two things at the same time: relief that they left, and something small and quiet that's glad they came. But before that moment arrives, you did what you always do. You cleaned the house before they got there. Not because it was dirty, but because strangers in a messy space feels like being caught with your guard down. You thought about what to offer them to drink before they even pulled into the driveway. You mentally mapped out where they'd sit, how long they'd probably stay, and what excuse you'd use if it ran too long. You checked the bathroom, twice, not for them, for you, because having everything in its place is how you keep the anxiety from showing up at the door before the guest does. And when they finally left, you didn't just sit down, you reset the room, moved the cushion back to where it belongs, took the glasses to the kitchen, maybe wiped down the counter that didn't really need wiping. Because the house being back to exactly how it was, that's not OCD, that's the exhale. That's your nervous system going, okay, we're good, we're back. Not because you didn't enjoy it, you probably did, but because you're someone who needed to be safe first. And that took a while to build. The walls, the order, the specific mug on the specific shelf, none of that was ever really about keeping people out. It was about finally having something that couldn't be taken apart by someone else's choices, something that was just yours. And now that you have it, you get to decide what it means to share it, on your terms, at your pace, with the people who earned it. Do you hate having guests over? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, gently tap the like and subscribe button below, and check out this video next. I'll see you there.